Christian faith is based on the resurrection, so I'm gonna look for evidence and eyewitnesses of the resurrection. Is there any? The dilemma with Jesus was not that his tomb was empty. This isn't a case of a missing body, no. The issue is that he was killed on the cross, he was seen dead and was buried, and then he was seen alive. The appearances occurred for 40 days, and the resurrection has changed the course of history forever. And let's be honest, coming back to life after 3 days has never happened before or since in the history of the world. It wasn't an NDE. He had a different type of physical body, and he could appear and vanish suddenly. Moreover, Jesus said he would rise after 3 days. This was his widely known prophecy. The high priest did not take this declaration lightly and begged Pilate to place security guards at the tomb, but nothing could prevent what was about to happen. It was a miracle that God had planned long before. Prophets had talked about it for hundreds of years, but can we find proof of the resurrection? Our story begins with the eyewitnesses of the empty tomb. On the 3rd day after Jesus' crucifixion, Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James, Joanna, Salome, and other women visited Jesus' tomb. To their astonishment, the stone sealing the entrance had been rolled away, and Jesus' body was no longer inside. 2 angels were there, causing them great alarm. These angels told them Jesus had risen and reminded them of Jesus' prophetic words about his death and resurrection. As Mary Magdalene saw the empty tomb and the angels, she ran to inform the disciples that Jesus' body was missing. Peter and John quickly followed her. Peter and John saw Jesus' burial clothes in the tomb, and John seems to imply that the cloth played a role in his belief that Jesus had risen. One was the Shroud of Turin, and the other was the Sudarium of Oviedo. Scientists proved that the Sudarium and the Shroud covered the same body, but the Sudarium, the face cloth, was only used until Jesus' body was carried to the tomb, so it was not on Jesus' face in the moment of resurrection, but the Shroud was, and it has a double image in a negative form. This is a unique 3-dimensional image unlike any other in the world. No one can duplicate it, not even with modern science today. You may be a Shroud skeptic, but I tell you, a lot of scientific evidence suggests that the Shroud was used to cover the body of Jesus Christ. I have a video where I go into further details. Briefly, various analysis methods all point to the fact that the Shroud dates back to the 1st century. Moreover, the Shroud features a traditional triple herringbone weave pattern and unique stitching that dates back to the 1st century. Special coins were placed over the eyes of the man of the Shroud, known as lepton, minted during the reign of Tiberius Caesar and Pontius Pilate around AD 29 and 30. 58 pollen grains were discovered on the Shroud. Among these, 45 came from Jerusalem and were sourced from flowers that bloom in March and early April. Gandelia tornaforti pollen, a thorny plant linked to the crown of thorns, is notably found near the head region. Furthermore, on both the Sudarium and Shroud were small pieces of travertine, aragonite, and limestone called Jerusalem limestone. The limestone on the Shroud was similar to a sample from the Damascus Gate, the closest gate to Golgotha. The blood found on the Sudarium and the Shroud has been identified as belonging to a tortured man with blood type AB. This blood type is the rarest, counting only about 4-5% of the world's population. However, it's more prevalent among the Jewish community. But the point is that every mark on the Shroud mirrors the Gospels. You can see evidence of a crown of thorns, scourging, and nail puncture wounds on the wrists and feet. His legs were not broken, which was the usual practice to hasten death, and he had a spear wound in the side. This man had a very unique crucifixion. These details fit only one man and only one story in history. Furthermore, the Shroud shows no signs of decomposition. The body was in contact with the Shroud for approximately 30 to 36 hours. Considering the timeline, it can be deduced that the body was not beneath the cloth at the latest 6 a.m. Eastern Sunday. The bloodstains came first, followed by a sudden flash of high-energy radiation released by the body in the Shroud, which caused the unique, superficial, 3-dimensional double image in negative form. The image shows the entire body. However, not all areas of the cloth touch the body. What is truly mind-blowing is that the image on the Shroud is in motion, indicating that his hands, feet and chest moved when he breathed. The current theory is that the body became mechanically transparent and emitted light from every 3-dimensional point. It means Jesus' glorified body passed through the cloud, which then collapsed upon itself. Additionally, the position of Jesus' head on the Shroud suggests that he was upright. and suspended slightly above the ground when the light burst occurred. All evidence suggests that the shroud is authentic, possibly indicating the resurrection event. We have a lot of eyewitnesses to the empty tomb and the angels. We have the imprint of the resurrection on the shroud, but are there any eyewitnesses of the resurrection? No one indeed saw the process when the resurrection happened, but many people saw Jesus alive 3 days after his crucifixion. Let's find them. Mary Magdalene, filled with sorrow and confusion, was standing at the tomb of Jesus. She did not appear even aware that she was speaking with angels, and suddenly she came face to face with the risen Jesus in a garden early morning. Others also saw him, and they immediately fell down worshipping him. Next, Cleopas and another disciple walked with Jesus to Emmaus, but their eyes were holden from recognizing him. As they walked together to Emmaus, Jesus explained the scriptures about the Messiah. As they approached their village, the disciples urged Jesus to stay with them. He accepted their invitation. At the table, Jesus took bread, blessed it, broke it, and gave it to them. At this point, their eyes were opened, and finally they recognized him. Then, he suddenly vanished from their sight. Later that same day, Jesus appeared in a room where the disciples had gathered. The disciples had encountered Jesus, and he showed them his hands and his side. However, Thomas was not present when everyone saw Jesus alive after he was crucified. When the disciples told him about it later, he refused to believe in the resurrection without physical proof. A week later, Jesus appeared again. This time, Thomas was present. Jesus invites Thomas to touch his wounds and not doubt but believe. And with that, Thomas gives voice to the greatest confession of faith in the New Testament. Thomas drops to his knees and proclaims these words, "My Lord and my God." Then Simon Peter, Thomas, Nathanael, the sons of Zebedee, and 2 other disciples fished at the Sea of Tiberias but caught nothing when Jesus appeared and performed the miracles of the fish again. And then he joined them for breakfast. At this time, Jesus required Peter to confess his love toward Jesus 3 times and told Peter to feed his sheep. This was the 3rd time that they saw the risen Jesus. Then they went to the mountains near Galilee, where they were appointed to meet him again. It was there that the 11 saw and worshipped him, and Jesus told them to make disciples of all nations. But Jesus performed many other things as well. He appeared to the apostles for 40 days, and he was with them at the Mount of Olives before his ascension. We also know that the 11 disciples gathered together to decide on a replacement for Judas. The new disciple had to meet specific requirements. One of them was to be an eyewitness to the resurrected Messiah. Both candidates, Barsabbas and Matthias, had seen him alive after he rose from the dead. Next, in 1 Corinthians chapter 15, Paul lays out an old Christian creed and gives a rundown of people who had witnessed Jesus' post-resurrection appearances. Paul did not list all the appearances, just the most important ones. This included Peter, the 12, James, and all the apostles. Even Paul counted himself among the eyewitnesses of Jesus, revealing that Jesus had visibly appeared to him in his conversion. But get this, Jesus even appeared to over 500 brothers and sisters all at once. Most of them were still hanging around when Paul wrote this. This fact is crucial, because anyone who wanted to challenge Jesus' resurrection claim could have questioned these eyewitnesses. They were real people with their own stories to tell. When assessing the accuracy of an event from history, one way to verify its validity is by analyzing how many eyewitnesses were alive when reports about it were released. Undoubtedly, the number of witnesses and confirmation of Jesus' post-resurrection appearances is overwhelming. Imagine, you had to ask each witness in court 15 minutes of questions. It would take from Monday morning until Friday night without a break. This is 129 hours of witness testimony. After this, who could still be unconvinced? The empty tomb, the grave clothes, the angels, and the appearances of Jesus to his disciples are all essential pieces of evidence that support the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Multiple appearances have been confirmed in more than one gospel and recorded in the 1 Corinthians chapter 15 creed. But the most convincing evidence of Jesus' resurrection is that these people were willing to declare that Jesus was alive. They didn't gain power or wealth. Every single one of them could have walked away and gone back to their old lives, but they didn't. Instead, they risked everything, including their own lives. So it begs the question, why would they do it? Because it was real. These eyewitnesses had no doubts that Jesus had actually risen from the dead. They had seen it with their own eyes and touched it with their hands. For these brave men and women, the resurrection was not just a story, but the foundation of their lives. So the resurrection is not just the biggest miracle of all time, but one of the most strongly supported historical facts.